Hello, and welcome back to Sovereign Judgment, where suburban authority meets the one thing it fears most: somebody who reads the paperwork. Today's story begins with one compost pile, one furious clipboard, and enough worms to generate more annual revenue than our entire homeowners association collected in dues. Before we get into it, tell me where you're listening from, and whether your neighborhood has its own self-appointed minister of mulch. Now let me take you back to the morning Patricia Wexler decided my banana peels were a threat to civilization. At 7:42 on a Tuesday morning, I opened my front door and found a cream-colored envelope taped directly over the keyhole. Not slipped beneath the door, not placed in the mailbox, taped over the keyhole, as though the envelope itself had been trained to prevent my escape. The paper was thick enough to qualify as light construction material. The Briar Glen Homeowners Association logo had been embossed in metallic green across the top, featuring 3 oak trees, a fountain, and what appeared to be a tiny family fleeing from restrictive landscaping guidelines. Inside was a single page printed in 12-point Garamond, the preferred font of people who want to fine you while maintaining the atmosphere of a private school fundraiser. Notice of organic waste violation. My backyard compost bin, it informed me, was creating an unsightly agricultural condition inconsistent with the residential harmony of Briar Glen. The notice demanded that I remove the compost within 72 hours, or face an initial fine of $150, followed by daily penalties of $35. At the bottom, someone had highlighted the words "Final Warning" in yellow. This was interesting, because it was also the first warning. I stood there, wearing blue pizza socks, holding a mug of coffee that had already gone cold, and read the notice twice. My compost pile consisted of a black plastic tumbler measuring 36 inches wide and 44 inches tall. It sat behind a 6-foot cedar privacy fence, 28 feet from the nearest property line, hidden by 2 hydrangeas and a garden shed. You could not see it from the street. You could not see it from either neighbor's yard. You could barely see it while standing in my yard unless you walked behind the shed, with the determined investigative energy of a Labrador searching for a missing sausage. Yet somehow, my compost had disturbed the residential harmony. I looked toward the street. A white golf cart sat at the curb with an amber warning light mounted on top. The light was flashing despite there being no emergency, no roadworks, and no visible reason for a golf cart to possess emergency lighting. Behind the wheel sat Patricia Wexler, president of the Briar Glen HOA. She was watching me. Patricia wore a coral floral tracksuit that looked like a botanical garden had exploded inside a discount luggage shop. Her visor matched the flowers. Her sunglasses were large enough to observe weather patterns. A clipboard rested against the steering wheel like a ceremonial shield. When she saw me holding the letter, she lifted 2 fingers in a tiny wave. I lifted the notice. She nodded once, then drove away at 9 miles per hour, with the solemn dignity of an aircraft carrier departing for war. That was how the worm farm started. I bought the house at 114 Juniper Lantern Drive, after 12 years of living in apartments where every meaningful life decision had to be measured against the question, will this annoy the person below me? The house was not grand. It had 3 bedrooms, 1 crooked porch step, and a garage door that made a noise like a walrus being introduced to jazz. But it had a backyard. My late father, Thomas Bell, had loved gardens. He could grow tomatoes in soil that looked capable of rejecting plant life on moral grounds. When I was a child, he kept a red coffee tin beneath the kitchen sink for vegetable scraps, which he turned into compost behind our shed. He called it "Feeding Next Summer." When he died, I inherited his gardening notebook, his dented hand trowel, and a powerful emotional inability to throw away coffee grounds. So when I moved into Briar Glen, I built 3 raised beds and planted tomatoes, peppers, basil, carrots, and 1 row of courgettes that expanded across the garden like an occupying military force. The compost tumbler fed those beds. It did not smell. It did not leak. It did not attract rats. I knew this because before purchasing it, I had spent 4 evenings comparing carbon to nitrogen ratios, aeration systems, pest-resistant seals, and municipal composting codes. That is what happens when you spend your working life analyzing logistics systems. Some people relax with television. I build spreadsheets that correctly predict the decomposition rate of melon rind. My name is Daniel Bell, and at that point, I worked remotely as an operations analyst for a regional food distributor. My job was to take chaotic systems full of waste, delay, and unnecessary movement and turn them into orderly systems full of less waste, shorter delays, and colorful charts senior management pretended to understand. I did not think that would matter to Patricia Wexler. I underestimated both of us. At 8:06 that morning, my doorbell rang. Patricia stood on the porch with her clipboard pressed to her chest. Up close, the tracksuit was even more aggressive. It contained hibiscus flowers the size of dinner plates. "Good morning, Mr. Bell," she said. Her voice had the tonal quality of a teaspoon trapped in a rubbish disposal. "Morning. I saw that you received the notice. You taped it over my keyhole. We require proof of delivery. You watched me open it. That is additional proof." Patricia smiled with the professional warmth of someone about to explain why your own driveway had been incorrectly parked on. I held up the letter. "It says my compost creates an unsightly agricultural condition." "Correct. How did you see it?" She shifted her clipboard by half an inch. "We received a complaint." "From whom?" "Complaints are confidential." "Then how did the complainant see it?" Patricia's smile tightened like cling film over a casserole dish. Section 8, paragraph 14 of the Community Standards prohibits outdoor storage or processing of refuse, waste, agricultural byproducts, commercial materials, or substances likely to create odors. It's a sealed residential compost tumbler. It processes organic refuse. So does my stomach. Her mouth opened slightly. I took a sip of cold coffee. It tasted like a puddle that had once heard rumors about coffee. Patricia looked down at her clipboard. "The board has determined that the structure is non-compliant." "Has the board inspected it?" "I inspected it." "From where?" "The common drainage easement." The drainage easement ran behind my property. It was separated from my yard by the cedar fence. "You looked over my fence?" "I conducted a visual compliance assessment." "How?" She straightened with the posture of a 4-star general inspecting troops who had planted unauthorized marigolds. "That is not relevant. It feels relevant from this side of the fence. Mr. Bell, you have 72 hours. I would prefer not to escalate this." That was the first time Patricia said she did not want to escalate. Over the next 7 weeks, she would say it 12 more times, usually while escalating. I looked past her toward the golf cart. The amber light was still flashing. "Is there a written HOA rule specifically banning compost bins?" "The section I quoted is sufficient." "That wasn't my question." Her eyes narrowed behind the sunglasses. "Failure to comply will result in fines." "How many other homes have been cited for composting?" "This discussion is over." She pivoted so sharply her visor nearly achieved flight. "Patricia?" She stopped. "You left something out of the notice." She turned around. "What? The photograph?" "What photograph?" "The one proving the violation." Her face became still. For 3 seconds, only the golf cart's amber light moved, rotating like a tiny lighthouse, warning ships away from rational conversation. "We are not required to provide photographic evidence." Section 3, paragraph 9 of the enforcement policy says you are. Patricia stared at me. I had downloaded the bylaws when I bought the house. I had read them, because I am the sort of person who reads software license agreements when trapped at airports.
"I'll have the management company send it," she said.
Great. She walked toward her golf cart with a stride like a flamingo, late for a disciplinary hearing. I closed the door. My hands were shaking slightly. I wish I could tell you I was immediately calm and confident, but I was not. The HOA could issue liens. They could send accounts to collections. They could turn a disagreement over banana peels into a legal expense with its own monthly payment plan. I had saved for 6 years to buy that house. The idea that somebody with a visor and a battery-powered vehicle could threaten it made something hot settle behind my ribs. So I did what I always did when frightened. I opened Excel. By lunchtime, I had created a folder called Compost Matter and a spreadsheet with columns for date, time, communication method, alleged violation, cited rule, evidence provided, response deadline, and Patricia's clothing. The clothing column was not legally necessary, but accuracy matters. At 4:18 that afternoon, the management company emailed me a photograph. It showed the top 6 inches of my compost tumbler above the fence. The image had clearly been taken from an elevated position. I zoomed in. In the lower right corner was the edge of Patricia's coral sleeve. In the lower left corner was a silver horizontal rail. I walked outside and measured the golf cart. The top rail matched. Patricia had parked in the drainage easement, stood on her golf cart seat, leaned over my 6-foot fence, and photographed my compost bin. I added a row to the spreadsheet. The next morning, I emailed the HOA requesting dismissal of the notice because the rule did not specifically prohibit contained residential composting. The bin was not visible from the street. There was no documented odor, and the photograph had apparently been taken by looking over my privacy fence from atop a vehicle. Patricia replied 11 minutes later, "Your assumptions regarding the inspection method are inaccurate and inflammatory." I replied, "What was the inspection method?" She did not answer. At 6:30 that evening, the Briar Glen Community Facebook page received a new post. Patricia had written, "Residents are reminded that Briar Glen is a premier residential community, not a farm, dump, industrial site, or experimental agricultural zone. Organic waste attracts vermin and reduces property values. The board will take all necessary action to preserve neighborhood standards." She attached a stock photograph of a rat. It was not my rat. It was not even a local rat. Based on the watermark, it was a professionally photographed British rat. Patricia had imported foreign vermin to strengthen her case. Comments appeared beneath the post. "Is someone keeping livestock?" asked Linda from Hawthorne Crescent. "Are chickens involved?" asked Brian Cho. "My property value has not changed today," wrote my next-door neighbor, Evelyn Price. Patricia replied to Evelyn, "Impacts may not be immediately visible." Evelyn wrote, "Neither is Daniel's compost bin." The post disappeared 12 minutes later. The first fine arrived on Friday, $150. The second arrived Monday, $35. By the end of the week, I owed $290 for owning a container full of vegetable peelings that Patricia had to climb onto a golf cart to discover. Then she began performing inspections. Every morning between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, the white golf cart crawled down the drainage easement behind my house. The amber light flashed. Patricia wore different outfits, each more prepared for municipal combat than the last. One day it was white capri trousers ironed so sharply they could have sliced cheese. Another day it was a lavender polo embroidered with Briar Glen Board President over the heart, like a medal she had awarded herself after surviving a difficult gazebo meeting. She carried the clipboard every time. On the fourth morning, I was waiting behind the fence. I heard the golf cart stop. Then a squeak. Then the soft grunt of a woman climbing onto a vinyl seat while attempting to preserve executive dignity. I raised my phone and began recording. A shadow appeared above the fence. Then Patricia's visor. Then her sunglasses. Then most of her face. "Morning," I said. She let out a sound like a goose discovering income tax. The visor vanished. There was a thump, followed by the golf cart horn giving one accidental, mournful beep. "Are you all right?" I called. "I am conducting an inspection. From my airspace? You are recording me without permission. We're outdoors. This is harassment. You're looking over my fence. I have authority to verify ongoing violations. Can you show me the section granting you authority to climb onto a golf cart and look into private yards?" "I am not climbing." I looked at the 3 inches of visor still visible above the fence. "Then you're unusually tall today." Patricia's head slowly lowered. The golf cart reversed with a shrill electric whine, like a microwave trying to escape a kitchen. At 9:14, I received a violation for hostile interference with an authorized inspection. The fine was $75. That nearly broke my composure. I sat at the kitchen table reading the email, while my coffee cooled beside me for the third time that morning. There are moments when anger does not feel fiery. It feels clean and cold. It sharpens every object in the room. I wanted to call Patricia. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her authority, her golf cart, her imported rat, and her laminated interpretation of civic life. Instead, I added the email to the spreadsheet. Then I called the city. The woman in code enforcement transferred me to environmental services. Environmental services transferred me to waste management. Waste management transferred me back to code enforcement, creating a perfect bureaucratic circle that could have powered a small turbine. Eventually, I reached an inspector named Lionel Webb. Lionel spoke in a deep, slow voice that sounded like gravel being poured into a velvet bag. A sealed backyard compost tumbler? He asked. Yes. No meat? No. No dairy? No. No visible runoff? No. You got rats? No. You got smell? No. You got a woman on a golf cart? Yes. There was a pause. We don't regulate women on golf carts. I assumed. The compost bin is legal. City encourages home composting. We give residents a rebate for those tumblers. How much? $40. So the city paid me to install the thing my HOA is fining me to remove. That appears to be where we've landed. He emailed me a copy of the municipal composting ordinance and a brochure titled, Turn Scraps into Soil. I forwarded both to Patricia. Her response arrived at 2:03. Municipal permissibility does not override private community covenants. Technically, she was right. Sometimes HOA rules can be stricter than city rules. But her rule still did not mention compost. It mentioned refuse processing, agricultural byproducts, and odors. My bin was sealed, odorless, and intended for personal gardening, so I requested a hearing before the board. Patricia scheduled it for 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, when most residents were at work. The meeting took place in the clubhouse conference room, which smelled like carpet cleaner and old arguments. 3 board members sat behind a folding table. Patricia occupied the center seat. To her right sat Vice President Gerald Nunn, a retired dentist with eyebrows like 2 exhausted caterpillars. To her left sat Secretary Marjorie Pike, who wore a cardigan decorated with tiny sailboats, despite Briar Glen being 180 miles from navigable water. Patricia arranged 3 sharpened pencils beside her clipboard. Mr. Bell, she began, in a tone like a headmistress addressing a pupil who had released a ferret during assembly. You have requested review of multiple violations related to an unauthorized waste processing facility. It's a compost tumbler. That is your characterization. It's printed on the side. Patricia looked at Gerald. Gerald looked down. Marjorie coughed into one hand, possibly to conceal a laugh or a medical event. Patricia continued. Section 8, paragraph 14, prohibits the processing of refuse. Does putting rubbish into a kitchen bin count as processing? No. Why not? Because that is ordinary residential use. So is composting. That is your opinion. It's also the city's opinion. The city does not govern Briar Glen standards. The city definitely governs Briar Glen. You understand my meaning. I understand you'd like it to. Gerald's eyebrows rose slightly. Patricia clasped her hands. The board has observed a pattern of defiance. I asked for evidence. You interfered with an inspection. You were standing on a golf cart to look over my fence. I was not standing. I have video. The room went quiet. Patricia's face tightened like a drawstring bag full of lemons. You recorded an HOA officer performing official duties? I recorded someone looking over my fence. May we see it? Marjorie asked. Patricia turned. That is unnecessary. I'd like to see it, Gerald said. I placed my phone on the table and played the video. Patricia's visor rose above the fence. I said, Morning. Video Patricia made the goose and income tax sound. Video Patricia denied climbing while visibly elevated above a 6-foot barrier. When the clip ended, Gerald removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Marjorie stared at the table. Patricia said, The angle is misleading. The angle is from the ground, I replied. She called for a private board discussion. I waited outside for 23 minutes beside a fake ficus tree whose leaves held enough dust to qualify as insulation. When I was invited back inside, Patricia read the decision. The board upheld every fine. Gerald would not meet my eyes. Marjorie looked ill. Patricia smiled. Your current outstanding balance is $435. Daily fines will continue until the waste processing equipment is removed. You're sure? I beg your pardon? You're certain this is the board's final interpretation? Yes. Contained composting is prohibited because it processes organic refuse. That is correct. And Briar Glen is not a farm, industrial site, or experimental agricultural zone. She lifted her chin. Precisely. I nodded. Thank you for clarifying. Patricia looked confused. It was the first sensible expression I had seen on her face. I paid none of the fines. Instead, I filed a formal records request for board minutes, enforcement histories, vendor contracts, insurance policies, landscaping invoices, legal correspondence, and every violation issued under Section 8, Paragraph 14, during the previous 5 years. Patricia responded that the request was excessively burdensome. I sent her the state statute requiring production within 10 business days. She produced 612 pages. I spent the weekend reading them. My dining table disappeared beneath stacks of paper. I built an index. I color-coded enforcement actions. I created a pivot table. By Sunday afternoon, the HOA's governing history lay open before me, like the world's least exciting treasure map. Briar Glen had cited 12 residents under Section 8, Paragraph 14. 6 for rubbish bins visible from the road, 3 for piles of construction debris, 1 for a leaking container of used cooking oil, 1 for storing bags of fertilizer beneath a front window, and 1 for a child's plastic toy composting kit, which Patricia had ordered removed from a porch because it encouraged agricultural aesthetics. There was no formal compost ban. There was also no consistent enforcement. The clubhouse maintained 2 open compost cages behind the tennis courts for landscaping waste. The HOA's contracted gardener deposited grass clippings there every Thursday. I photographed them. Then I discovered something better. The covenants applied only to residential lots. My property, however, included an unusual 0.84-acre rear parcel beyond the drainage easement. The previous owner had purchased it from the developer before the HOA was formed. It had a separate parcel number and was zoned rural residential transition. The fence made both parcels appear to be one backyard, but legally they were distinct. The rear parcel was subject to city and county rules. It was not part of the HOA. I stared at the survey. Then I opened the county zoning code. Rural residential transition allowed home gardening, horticultural structures, agricultural education, small-scale composting, and limited vermiculture. Vermiculture. Worm farming. I said the word aloud. It entered the room quietly and sat down. At 3:18 on Sunday afternoon, I searched for commercial vermiculture consultants. That was how I found Michael, Big Mike Treadwell. Big Mike owned Treadwell Soil Systems, a composting and worm casting operation 30 miles west of Briar Glen. His website featured a photograph of him standing beside a mound of black soil, with both thumbs raised. He was shaped like a vending machine that had developed strong opinions about municipal waste policy. His gray beard reached the second button of his flannel shirt, and his forearms looked capable of opening pickle jars merely by entering the kitchen. I called him Monday morning. "Treadwell Soil," he answered. "I'm interested in starting a worm farm." "How interested?" My HOA complained about one compost tumbler. There was a pause. Then Big Mike said, "I'm listening with my entire body." I explained the parcel, the zoning, the fines, Patricia, the golf cart, and the imported British rat. When I finished, he gave a low whistle. "Son, that woman didn't step on a rake. She entered a long-term lease with the rake and listed it as her emergency contact." I liked him immediately. Could a worm farm legally operate on less than an acre? Depends on setbacks, runoff, feedstock, structures, annual volume, and whether your county inspector wakes up angry. What are you trying to build? I'm not sure yet. What do you want the farm to do? I looked at Patricia's violation notice pinned above my desk. I want it to be unquestionably lawful, completely odorless, environmentally useful, financially viable, and visible from a golf cart. Big Mike laughed for so long I had to check whether the call had disconnected. When he recovered, he said, "Daniel, I've spent 27 years turning rubbish into money. You have just described my love language." We met the next morning at the property. Big Mike arrived in a forest green truck, carrying 6 survey stakes, a moisture meter, 3 buckets, and a breakfast burrito, the approximate dimensions of a fire extinguisher. He walked the rear parcel slowly, chewing while he studied the slope. The land measured 0.84 acres, mostly level, with access from a county service road behind it. A line of mature pines separated it from the nearest house. Big Mike crouched, picked up a handful of soil, smelled it, squeezed it, and let it fall. "Drainage is good," he said. He moved toward the eastern boundary. "Power line is close. Water access? Spigot at the shed. Can run a proper line. County road can handle a medium truck. Nearest residence is 140 feet. Prevailing wind goes northwest." He stood and looked toward Patricia's drainage easement. The white golf cart had stopped 50 yards away. Its amber light flashed. Patricia watched us through binoculars. Big Mike lowered his voice. Is that her? Yes. She brought binoculars? Yes. To inspect dirt? Yes. He nodded respectfully. I would follow this woman into battle, provided I was fighting against her. We spent 2 hours measuring setbacks and discussing possibilities. Big Mike explained that red wiggler worms could process large volumes of pre-composted food waste, cardboard, coffee grounds, and agricultural byproducts. Their castings sold to gardeners, nurseries, landscapers, cannabis growers, golf courses, greenhouse operators, and organic farms. A modest operation could produce thousands of pounds per month. A professionally managed one could do far more. What would something like that be worth? I asked. Built correctly? Land, permitted structures, equipment, contracts, brand, annual production capacity? $200,000 wouldn't be crazy. I looked at him. The title writes itself. What? Nothing. Big Mike drew a rectangle in the soil with a survey stake. You could install a 60-foot climate-controlled worm building here. Continuous flow beds inside, screening and bagging at the far end, covered receiving bay near the road, solar ventilation, closed-loop water collection. That sounds expensive. It is. How expensive? About $118,000 before working capital. I don't have $118,000. You don't need it all. There are state soil health grants, county waste diversion incentives, low-interest conservation loans, and private contracts. But first, we make it legal enough to survive a woman with binoculars. That afternoon, Big Mike introduced me to Priya Desai, a land use attorney who specialized in agricultural zoning and environmental permitting. Priya was 5 feet 2 inches tall, wore red glasses, and moved through zoning documents like a shark through a nervous school of fish. Her office contained 6 plants, 4 filing cabinets, and a framed letter from an HOA president demanding she remove a commercially colored front door. You've had your own Patricia, I said. Priya looked at the letter. His name was Douglas. He tried to regulate beige. What happened? I introduced him to judicial review. She examined my deed, survey, covenants, annexation records, zoning map, and Patricia's notices. After 40 minutes, she tapped the rear parcel with one red fingernail. This land is not within the association. You're certain. It was never annexed. The deed restriction references parcel 17A. Your residential lot is 17A. The rear tract is 17B. Can the HOA regulate what happens there? No. Can I operate a worm farm? Under current zoning, yes. Subject to a minor agricultural use permit, environmental management plan, setbacks, traffic limits, and county inspection. What if Patricia claims the smell affects the neighborhood? Then she may file a complaint. The county will inspect. If your operation meets the approved odor and containment plan, the complaint becomes a piece of paper. What if she trespasses? Document it. Warn her. Do not obstruct her physically. What if she stands on a golf cart? Priya looked over her glasses. Is that hypothetical? No. Then I would recommend she stop doing that, for reasons extending beyond property law. Priya sent a formal letter to the HOA demanding withdrawal of the fines, confirmation that the rear parcel was outside association authority, and preservation of all communications relating to me. Patricia replied without counsel. Her email was 7 paragraphs long and contained the phrase, community sovereignty, 4 times. She asserted that, although parcel 17B might not be technically annexed, any activity there remained subject to the HOA because it was visually and spiritually connected to my residence. Priya read that sentence twice. Spiritually connected? Yes. That is not a recognized land use category. She seems committed to it. Priya smiled. Good. We began the permit process. I submitted a 48-page application to the county agricultural office. It included site plans, grading calculations, a traffic schedule, odor controls, runoff capture, emergency procedures, feedstock restrictions, equipment specifications, neighbor buffers, and an economic impact estimate. Big Mike prepared the operational plan. Priya handled the zoning analysis. Lionel Webb, from Environmental Services, agreed to inspect the proposed site. Lionel arrived wearing a tan county uniform, and the facial expression of a man who had once been asked to determine whether a garden gnome constituted an accessory dwelling unit. He walked the parcel with Big Mike and me. Patricia followed us from the drainage easement in her golf cart. At one point, she stopped 6 feet away and raised her phone. Lionel looked at her. "Can I help you? I'm Patricia Wexler, president of Briar Glen. Congratulations. I need to know what is occurring. We're conducting a site inspection." "For what purpose?" "A permit application." "What permit?" Lionel glanced at me. "Mr. Bell, may I disclose the application type?" "Yes." Lionel turned back to Patricia. "Vermiculture." Patricia blinked. "Excuse me?" "Worms." Her mouth tightened. "How many worms?" "Permit doesn't regulate population." "I'm asking for a number." Big Mike folded his arms. "Initial stock, roughly 2 million. Patricia's face changed as though someone had informed her that every worm would receive voting rights. 2 million worms? Give or take, Big Mike said. They don't hold still for census work. This is a residential community. This parcel is outside the HOA, I said. It is adjacent to the community. So is the county road. You cannot install an industrial worm facility behind my neighborhood. It's my neighborhood too. Patricia drew herself upright, clipboard tucked beneath one arm like a field marshal receiving disappointing intelligence. Section 8. Paragraph 14 expressly prohibits agricultural byproducts. On HOA lots, I said. This land is connected to your lot. Spiritually? Lionel looked from Patricia to me. What does that mean? Nothing recognized by the county, I said. Patricia's voice rose like a kettle discovering betrayal. You cannot hide behind technicalities while transforming Briar Glen into a commercial compost dump. Big Mike pointed toward the proposed building area. Actually, the compost receiving bay would be over there. The worms would be in here. That is not better. Lionel closed his notebook. Ms. Wexler, the county will review the application. You can submit written public comments during the notice period. I demand an immediate stop work order. No work has started. Then issue a stop before work order. We don't have those. You should. Lionel looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, Today I inspected an empty field while a woman requested emergency enforcement against future worms. He walked back to his truck. The public notice went up 3 weeks later. Proposed small-scale vermiculture and soil amendment facility. Patricia photographed the sign from 6 angles. That evening, she posted a 9-minute video on the community Facebook page. She stood in front of the clubhouse fireplace wearing a navy blazer over a shirt printed with pink flamingos. The blazer gave her the appearance of a cruise director announcing martial law. Residents, she began. Our community faces an unprecedented threat. A worm farm, she explained, could attract rats, snakes, flies, lorries, criminals, predatory birds, falling property values, contaminated groundwater, noise pollution, soil instability, and unregulated biological multiplication. She displayed a photograph of an earthworm enlarged to the size of a fire hose. She encouraged residents to attend the county hearing and defend Briar Glen from industrial exploitation. Unfortunately for Patricia, the county required all public claims to be supported by evidence. She submitted 32 pages. Page 4 included the British rat. Page 11 included a photograph of a vulture. Page 19 showed a landfill in another state. Page 27 contained a screenshot from a horror film about giant subterranean monsters. Priya added all 32 pages to our file. At the public hearing, Patricia arrived with 14 residents wearing matching green stickers that said, Save Briar Glen. Evelyn Price sat behind me, wearing a sticker she had altered with a pen. It now read, Save Briar Glen from meetings. The hearing officer, Janice Holloway, reviewed the application. Big Mike testified about odor control, enclosed processing, feedstock, worm biology, and commercial markets. Lionel confirmed the site complied with county setbacks. Priya explained the parcel history. Then Patricia approached the microphone. She carried her clipboard. Of course she carried her clipboard. Madam Hearing Officer, she began, her voice trembling with the energy of a violin string pulled across a cheese grater. I represent 186 families whose lives are being endangered by an industrial vermin production compound. Janice looked down at the application. It's a vermiculture facility. Worms are vermin. They are not classified as vermin. They are when there are 2 million. Classification does not change with quantity. Patricia placed her horror film screenshot on the projector. This image demonstrates the potential risks of uncontrolled underground organisms. Priya raised her hand. That is a promotional still from Tremors. Patricia turned. It is illustrative. Janice removed her glasses. Ms. Wexler, are you presenting a fictional monster as evidence? I am presenting a possible escalation scenario. A sound moved through the room like wind through dry grass. It was 40 people trying not to laugh. Patricia pointed at me. Mr. Bell has demonstrated hostility toward community standards. He has refused fines, interfered with inspections, recorded board officials, and openly mocked our governing documents. Janice looked at me. Did you mock the governing documents? I questioned whether my property was spiritually connected to the HOA. Janice looked at Priya. Priya handed her Patricia's email. Janice read the sentence. Her lips pressed together. Patricia continued speaking, but the room had already left her behind. The permit was approved unanimously. Conditions included no meat or dairy feedstock, enclosed pre-composting, operating hours from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock, no more than 4 delivery vehicles per day, quarterly water testing, and a maximum annual incoming material volume of 480 tons. We received a state waste diversion grant of $48,000. A conservation loan covered $60,000. Big Mike invested equipment in exchange for 20% ownership. A local coffee roasting chain signed a 3-year agreement to deliver grounds and purchase finished castings for its supplier farms. 2 nurseries signed purchase contracts. A landscaping company placed an advance order for £18,000. The projected valuation of the operating business, equipment, contracts, and improvements reached $203,500. The title's $200,000 worm farm was no longer a joke. It was a funded project with insurance. At 8:03 on a Monday morning, the first truck arrived. It carried steel framing for the 60 by 30-foot climate-controlled worm building. At 8:17, a second truck delivered insulated panels. At 8:42, county-approved contractors installed temporary erosion barriers. At 9:05, Big Mike drove in with a trailer carrying 2 stainless steel continuous flow worm beds, each 48 feet long. The beds looked like something a submarine might use to prepare lasagne. I stood near the service entrance wearing my pizza socks beneath work boots and holding coffee that had already gone cold. Patricia arrived at 9:11. The golf cart came down the drainage easement with its amber light, flashing at a speed suggesting both urgency and limited battery capacity. She stopped beside the fence. For once, she did not speak immediately. She looked at the trucks. She looked at the steel. She looked at the sign reading Bell and Treadwell Soil Systems. Then she looked at me. What is this? The approved worm farm. Her face went blank. You were not serious. We obtained financing. You said worm farm. That's what it is. This is a building. The worms requested shelter. You cannot construct a commercial facility here. I held up the permit. County says we can. I am ordering these workers to stop. They don't work for you. I am president of the HOA. Big Mike walked over carrying a hard hat. Morning, Patricia pointed at him. You are violating private community restrictions. Big Mike looked around slowly. Which private community? Briar Glen. He pointed at the property marker. Ends there. It does not end there in practice. Property boundaries tend to be strongest in practice. Patricia gripped her clipboard as though it were the final floating object after a shipwreck. I will call the police. Please do, I said. She stared at me. It was not the response she wanted. What? Call them. Her eyes narrowed. You think this is amusing? No. I think it's permitted. She pulled out her phone. Officer Raymond Cole arrived 26 minutes later. I knew his name because Patricia had already called him twice during the previous month. Once to report aggressive photography when I documented her golf cart, and once because Big Mike's truck had been parked near the service road for 13 minutes. Officer Cole was 48, broad-shouldered, and carried the permanent weariness of a man who had mediated too many conflicts involving bins. He stepped from his patrol car and looked at the construction site. Then he looked at Patricia. Then he looked at me. Worms? He asked. Eventually, I said. Patricia approached him quickly, floral sleeves moving like curtains in a storm. Officer, this commercial operation is being constructed in direct violation of HOA rules. I have ordered them to stop, and they have refused. Whose property? Mr. Bell's. Officer Cole looked at me. Permit? I handed it over. He read the first page, checked the parcel number, and examined the posted inspection certificate. Patricia kept talking. The HOA has jurisdiction over all activities connected to residences within Briar Glen. Officer Cole looked toward Priya, who had arrived to observe the first construction day. Priya said, "The rear parcel is not part of the association." Patricia lifted her clipboard. "That interpretation is disputed." "By whom?" Officer Cole asked. "The board." "Is the board a court?" "No, but..." "Do you have an injunction?" "We are exploring legal action." "So no." Patricia's jaw tightened. "This facility creates an immediate public nuisance." Officer Cole inhaled. There was no building yet, no worms, no compost, just steel beams, contractors, and a portable toilet that Patricia seemed to regard as evidence of social collapse. "What nuisance?" he asked. "The scale." Officer Cole handed the permit back to me. "Construction is lawful. This is a civil property dispute. Do not interfere with the workers." Patricia pointed toward the trucks. "They are using a road visible from the community." Officer Cole looked at the road. "Most roads are visible." She made a sound like a printer swallowing a paperclip. Officer Cole turned to leave. Then he stopped and delivered his usual final summary, in the flat voice of a man whose soul had already gone home for lunch. "The worms are not here. The building is legal, and I am not arresting the future." Construction continued. The building went up in 12 days. It had forest green insulated walls, a silver roof, solar-powered ventilation, sealed concrete floors, floor drains connected to a permitted collection tank, and 6 translucent roof panels that filled the interior with soft daylight. The receiving bay stood at the western end, behind a privacy screen. The worm beds ran down the center of the building. A stainless steel screener and bagging station occupied the far wall. Everything was cleaner than my kitchen. Big Mike brought in the first worms on 16 September at 10:30 in the morning. They arrived in 40 ventilated crates packed with moist bedding. Patricia watched from the drainage easement. She had upgraded. The golf cart now carried a magnetic sign reading Briar Glen Compliance Patrol. She also wore a body camera clipped to her HOA polo. I waved. She did not wave back. For 3 weeks, the operation ran without incident. Coffee grounds arrived in sealed containers. Shredded cardboard came from a packaging company. Pre-composted vegetable waste came from a local produce warehouse. The material was blended, temperature tested, and loaded into the worm beds. There was no odor beyond the earthy smell of damp soil. The worms processed nearly 4,000 pounds during the first month. Our first batch of castings tested beautifully. A nursery owner named Denise Hart called it black gold. Big Mike called it worm business. Patricia called it ongoing biological misconduct. She filed 6 complaints with the county. Lionel inspected 6 times. Each inspection found full compliance. On his 4th visit, he stepped inside, looked at the spotless floor, the organized bins, and the temperature logs mounted on the wall. "My kitchen isn't this clean," he said. "Mine isn't either," I replied. Patricia began filming deliveries. She parked on the drainage easement and held her phone out with both hands as each truck passed. Then she posted edited clips online with dramatic music. "Truck enters residential zone," one caption read. The truck was on a county road. Unknown substance unloaded near homes. The substance was cardboard. Workers wearing protective equipment. They wore gloves. The videos gained attention, but not the kind Patricia expected. Residents started visiting. They wanted to see the worms. We offered tours every Saturday at 11 o'clock. Children watched the screening machines separate finished castings. Gardeners asked questions. Evelyn began volunteering at the bagging table. Gerald Nunn bought 6 bags for his roses. Marjorie Pike brought her grandson. Even people who had worn Save Briar Glen stickers started posting photographs of their vegetables grown with Bell and Treadwell castings. Our social media following reached 18,000. A regional gardening program filmed a segment. Orders doubled. The estimated business value rose to $247,000. Patricia's complaints had become our marketing department. Then she made her final mistake. It happened during the Briar Glen Autumn Garden Fair. The HOA held the fair every October in the clubhouse car park. Residents sold plants, baked goods, crafts, and decorative objects built from reclaimed wood that looked like they had survived a minor shipwreck. The new board majority had invited Bell and Treadwell to operate an educational booth. Patricia opposed the invitation but lost the vote, 4-1. So we set up a table with sealed bags of castings, brochures, a clear-sided demonstration worm bin, and a banner reading "Healthy Soil Starts Small." At 10:15, the car park was full. Children painted flower pots. Big Mike explained worm digestion to 3 fascinated retirees. Evelyn sold tomato seedlings with the intensity of a commodities trader. Dawn. Officer Cole happened to be present because the police department had a community safety booth near the entrance. Patricia arrived in the golf cart at 10:32. The amber light flashed. The compliance patrol sign gleamed. She wore a white skirt suit covered in green leaves, making her look like a hedge that had recently won a local election. Her clipboard sat beside her. Her body camera was active. She stopped directly in front of our booth. "What is that?" she demanded. I looked at the clear demonstration bin. "Worms." "I can see that." "You asked. You were authorized to sell packaged soil products. You were not authorized to display live organisms." I held up the event approval email. Educational demonstration materials were approved. Not living materials. It doesn't specify. Remove them. "No!" Her eyes widened. Around us, conversations quieted. Big Mike set down a bag of castings. Patricia pointed at the bin. Section 11, Paragraph 6, prohibits animals at community events unless they are registered service animals. Worms are not classified as animals under that event rule. They are members of the animal kingdom. So are you. Evelyn turned away and pressed both hands over her mouth. Patricia's face went pink. "I am not going to tolerate disrespect. I'm answering your biological classification argument. You will remove that container immediately." "No." She looked around and realized she had an audience. That made everything worse. Patricia performed authority best when people were watching, the way some birds perform elaborate dances and others issue parking violations. She lifted her clipboard. "As HOA president, I am confiscating the unauthorized display pending a compliance review." I stepped between her and the table. "You may not take our property. This booth is on HOA grounds. The board approved it. I am the board president. You are one board member. I am authorized to enforce the covenants, not by stealing a worm bin. I am not stealing it. You're taking property that isn't yours. I am securing evidence." Officer Cole began walking toward us. I saw him. Patricia did not. "Do not touch the bin," I said clearly. "I am performing my official duty. You have been warned." She reached across the table. Big Mike said, "Ma'am, I strongly recommend you rethink the next 5 seconds." Patricia grabbed the handle. The demonstration bin weighed approximately 38 pounds. She expected it to weigh less. She pulled hard. The bin slid toward her, struck the edge of the table, and tilted. The lid was secured with 2 clips. One clip held, the other did not. The lid opened 3 inches. A mixture of damp, shredded cardboard and approximately 3,000 red wiggler worms shifted toward the opening like a tiny, extremely organized landslide. Patricia screamed. She released the handle. The bin dropped flat onto the table. Nothing spilled, but several worms were now visible near the lid. Patricia stumbled backward into a display of decorative pumpkins. One pumpkin rolled beneath her golf cart. Another bumped her ankle. She stepped sideways, caught the heel of her shoe on the edge of a hay bale, and sat down abruptly in a tray of biodegradable seed pots. The pots collapsed around her with a series of soft pops, like very polite fireworks. Her clipboard flew into the air and landed in Evelyn's tomato seedlings. The golf cart began to roll. Patricia had left it in neutral. It moved slowly across the sloped car park, pushing the pumpkin ahead of it like the world's least efficient snowplow. The amber light continued flashing. "Golf cart!" someone shouted. Big Mike ran after it with the determined bounce of a refrigerator late for a train. He grabbed the rear rail and stopped it 6 feet before it reached the cupcake table. Officer Cole arrived as Patricia struggled upright with 3 seed pots stuck to the back of her skirt. "What happened?" he asked. "She released worms," Patricia shouted. I pointed at the closed bin. No worms were released. She attacked me with the container. I told her not to touch it. I was confiscating an illegal animal display. Gerald Nunn stepped forward. The board approved the booth. Patricia turned on him. "You do not speak for the board. I'm vice president. You have undermined my authority since the Compost hearing." Marjorie joined him. "No, Patricia. We've tried to stop you from doing things like this." Patricia looked around. Her body camera was still recording. So were at least 20 phones. "This entire event is a coordinated campaign against me," she said, her voice wobbling like a shopping trolley with one square wheel. "Daniel Bell has deliberately created a nuisance business to punish the association. I created a permitted business on my land. You exploited a technical omission, the omission being that you don't own my land. You have cost this association thousands of dollars." Priya stepped from the crowd. "How?" Patricia froze when she saw her. Priya folded her arms. "How much has the association spent?" "That is confidential." Gerald looked at Patricia. "What did you spend?" "Necessary enforcement expenses. We never approved legal expenses," Marjorie said. Patricia's eyes moved toward the exit. Officer Cole noticed. "Ms. Wexler, I have nothing further to say." Priya held up a folder. "That's unfortunate, because the association's insurer sent us this yesterday." Patricia went pale. Over the previous month, Priya had contacted the HOA's insurance carrier regarding Patricia's repeated unauthorized inspections, threats, inconsistent enforcement, and interference with permitted business activity. The insurer had investigated. It discovered that Patricia had contacted the HOA's outside law firm 15 times without board approval. She had spent $11,840 in association funds seeking strategies to block the worm farm. She had also described Parcel 17B as HOA-controlled land despite receiving Priya's title opinion and the county's parcel confirmation. Worse, she had continued issuing fines after the association's attorney privately advised her that enforcement was unlikely to survive court review. The insurer denied coverage for any claim arising from her deliberate conduct. The law firm terminated representation until the unpaid balance was resolved, and the management company had scheduled an emergency board meeting. Gerald looked like a man who had just discovered his dentist had been billing him for emotional support. "You spent nearly $12,000? Patricia raised her chin. "To defend property values. Without a vote? Emergency authority. There was no emergency. There were 2 million worms." Big Mike lifted one finger. "Closer to 3.4 million now." Patricia's eyes closed. It was the expression of a person hearing the final trumpet at the end of a very specific apocalypse. Officer Cole looked at the worm bin, the crushed seed pots, the stationary golf cart, and Patricia's body camera. "Did you attempt to take their property after being warned not to?" "I was enforcing HOA rules." "That's not what I asked." She hesitated. "I touched the container. Did they threaten you?" "They were intimidating." "What did they say?" Patricia looked at Big Mike. He repeated. "I strongly recommended she rethink the next 5 seconds." Officer Cole nodded. That was excellent advice. Patricia looked at the crowd. Nobody stepped forward for her. Not one person. Even the matching green stickers had disappeared. She reached behind herself and pulled a seed pot from her skirt. It made a soft suction noise. Officer Cole closed his notebook. "This is a civil dispute. The booth is authorized. The worms stayed in the bin, and you sat on the garden supplies by yourself." The emergency board meeting occurred that evening. 143 homeowners attended in person or by proxy. The clubhouse reached fire code capacity, so dozens stood outside listening through open windows. Patricia sat at the front table, wearing a different suit and the same expression. Gerald introduced a motion to remove her as president. Marjorie seconded it. Patricia gave a 26-minute defense. She cited sections 2, 4, 8, 11, 14, and a paragraph from the architectural guidelines concerning satellite dishes. She accused the board of weakness, residents of disloyalty, the county of agricultural extremism, Big Mike of worm profiteering, and me of conducting a prolonged campaign of technical obedience. I wrote that phrase down. It was the nicest thing she had ever said about me. The removal vote passed 138 to 5. Two of the 5 votes were later discovered to be invalid proxies. Gerald Nunn became interim president. His entire inaugural speech was 9 words. "Let's stop bothering people who aren't bothering anybody." The room applauded for nearly a minute. The new board canceled my fines. They reimbursed my $750 in legal consultation costs. They adopted a written policy protecting sealed residential compost bins. They removed the amber light from the golf cart. They also sold the golf cart. The proceeds covered part of Patricia's unauthorized legal bill. Within 2 months, the HOA's insurance remained in place under stricter governance conditions. The board created spending controls, open meeting requirements, and a resident review committee. Gerald refused to use a clipboard. He said they had too much emotional history. Briar Glen changed in small ways. Evelyn expanded her tomato beds. Brian Cho installed a rain barrel. 3 families bought compost tumblers through the city rebate program. Children rode bicycles past the clubhouse without being warned about tire marks. Someone planted sunflowers beside the tennis courts, and nobody formed a committee to investigate their height. Patricia resigned from the board and listed her house in January. She sold it for $18,000 below asking price, although I should emphasize that the worm farm had nothing to do with that. The buyer simply noticed the kitchen needed updating and the garage contained 17 boxes of archived violation notices. Patricia moved to a condominium downtown on the 23rd floor. No lawn, no drainage easement, no golf cart. I heard she joined the building's decor committee within 6 weeks. Some organisms are remarkably adaptable. Bell and Treadwell Soil Systems had its first profitable quarter the following spring. We processed 96 tons of organic material that would otherwise have gone to landfill. We sold castings to 7 nurseries, 4 farms, 2 golf courses, and 1,300 online customers. The business was independently valued at $286,000. Big Mike framed the original violation notice and hung it above the bagging station. Beneath it, he attached a brass plaque. "Feeding next summer." My father would have liked that. I still keep 1 small compost tumbler behind the shed. It remains 28 feet from the property line, hidden by hydrangeas and completely invisible from the street. Sometimes I stand beside it in my pizza socks with a mug of cold coffee and watch delivery trucks enter the worm farm through the rear service road. The trucks carry coffee grounds, cardboard, and vegetable scraps. They leave with bags of soil amendment, invoices, and considerably more value than they arrived with. So tell me in the comments, what is the most ridiculous complaint an HOA or neighbor has ever made about your property? Like the video, subscribe, and join us again for more Sovereign Judgment. Patricia complained about my compost pile, so I expanded it into a $200,000 worm farm. Apparently, revenge is best served at 68 degrees, 40% moisture, and 3 million worms per acre.